Tapping in.
Are we live?
If we can preface it the right way, right? Do we want to get into what DaBaby said and go off of that? Because I'm open to having a conversation just beyond what he said, because how I approached it is I heard what was said, but then decided to pursue a mental journey of the conversation of Black sexuality outside of that. But I'm open to discussing exactly what he said if you are.
Yeah, no, thank you for making space for whatever direction we might take. I think it's important to, like, if the moment catalyzed this stream of thought for us and for other people, I think we can talk about what the moment is. And I think it's important to level set and set the intention of, like, first of all, his comments are not the views of this show, of anything that we represent or like respect. That's foul. First of all, the intent of this conversation, I think, is to have a conversation about where those type of ideas come from, how we can confront them, how we can change, while keeping in mind as much grace and forgiveness as we can for our people, right? So I think it's important to acknowledge what he said and what happened. I got a little bit of that in front of me, right? So I can rock from there. So basically, DaBaby had an opportunity to perform at Rolling Loud about a week ago in Miami, right? Amazing crowds, one of the first festivals that's been able to come together and happen since the pandemic in a full way, stacked lineup, you know what I'm saying? And besides this story, really no other tumultuous events. You know what I mean? I didn't hear about any fights. I didn't hear about any, so big ups to that. Right. So big ups to that first and foremost. But he had an opportunity to perform at Rolling Loud, and in front of his, he took the time between songs in his set to say, if you didn't show up today with HIV, AIDS, any of them deadly sexually transmitted diseases that make you die in 2-3 weeks, put your cell phone light in the air. Fellas, if you ain't sucking dick in the parking lot, put your cell phone light in the air. The most I'll give him is the context that I'll give him is that what he was doing is, if you've ever been to a concert, especially a rap show, in between songs, you know what I'm saying? They're trying to engage with the audience rather than just play the music over and over again, right? So like what he wants to do is have everybody engaged. He wants everybody to put their phones up. Oftentimes you're picking out general statements that, you know what I'm saying, you would draw from to say, yo, everybody that got $100 in your pocket, put your hands up, right?
Chicago, put your hands up.
Exactly, right? Now, he chose to make some comments about HIV, AIDS, and fellas sucking dick. I'm going to let you... Yeah.
So, one of the things about being in podcast, bro, is that everybody has a reaction to something, right? To a greater extent, we're doing the exact same thing. And so from the perspective of somebody that is going to put their ideas out on a platform, I like to be responsible, especially when they involve a reality that somebody is experiencing. And in this particular instance, the reality would be that of gay men. And I say gay Black men in specific because that is what is relevant to not just my Oculus, but also the people who I surround myself with. It was said by a Black man into what is a hip hop concert. Right now, if you understand the demographics of hip hop, have been to a festival, you know that majority of the people in that crowd are white. However, the fact that it was said by a Black man is something that, you know, it brings a little bit more relevance in that way. So I went out to one of my friends who is gay and spoke and I just engaged him in the idea, trying to find what our contribution to this conversation could be. He responds back in saying, why is it that two Black men are even having a conversation about this? It's kind of like two men talking about women issues. And I fully agreed. I said, you know what? I understand that this conversation is incomplete without the presence of somebody. I asked him to. He's like, yeah, nah. In the same way that when the Black Lives Matter movement was happening, I remember me and you expressing fatigue. Or like, man, all my white friends are calling me tripping on my phone. I would imagine it is a similar type of occurrence, right? So in respect to that, I think on my end, it's important to acknowledge, like, okay, that we can accept that this conversation is an incomplete one without the presence of somebody that identifies as that. But then further than that, what I came to find is this conversation is important because from two cis male genders, right? Because look at me being responsible. But and the reason I say cis is because a lot of what has been things like homosexuality is unnatural is in fact not true, right? So when we speak cis, we're now speaking of an alignment of what your sexual inclinations are to what your physiology are. That's what we're saying, right? Where when those things begin to when those things begin to mix, they begin to be a trans something, right? I'm not explaining that to people for any other reason than to say that our perspective is that which aligns and identifies with that type of sexuality. And because of that, this conversation is incomplete. But there is still something to be said about Black men correcting other Black men about things that they say that are wrong. When
1,000%.
something is wrong, we should say it.
Absolutely. And I think as much as it's important to acknowledge that the perspective of the community that was harmed is not present in this conversation, it's also important that the people who are of the community that did the harm reflect as well and think about how we can make spaces safer for the community that felt the harm, right? So in the same way that when there was the murder of George Floyd and some of my white friends were calling me to understand what they could do, what they should think, right? It's not my responsibility to guide them in action or to educate them, but it is their responsibility to take initiative. And I can respect that where that initiative comes from in asking, especially if, as you've done, you acknowledge your intent in asking and make it a part of the conversation that we now have and the action that we now take as straight men to make a safer space, right? Or at least talk about what happened and try and create a space for healing. So I appreciate you. Let's be as basic as we can about this. Why is what he said not okay?
I mean, it's like for instance, if you're at a concert, right? And let's say a white entertainer gets on stage and he says, put your fellas, put your hands up if you're not outside listening to hip hop wearing do-rags sagging your pants. If he says something like that, the Black community would be up in arms. We have, it's very peculiar that we have such a acute sense of when there's inference into what is supposed to be a Black matter. We can identify very quickly, even if it is not necessarily said. Like when oh man, this is a throwback reference, but on the Howard Stern show, when they called somebody a nap, no, it was on ESPN. They called girls nappy-headed hoes. He said those nappy-headed hoes, right? That immediate correlation we made without even blinking, and we all understood exactly what it meant, and we always can understand these things. So when you are placing the fellas sucking dick, that what does that have to do with anything? And then proximity with what has incorrectly been associated as being a gay disease is also wrong. It's wrong. Right. In your eyes, what's your take on it?
No, I agree with you. It's wrong to associate homosexuality with HIV and AIDS, especially when you're putting out information that's completely false, like these diseases make you die in 2 or 3 weeks, right? That's dangerous. And that creates an unsafe space for the gay people in the audience, right? You have literally a crowd of people. Your entire intention is to get them to do what you say and engage in what you're saying. And you're taking that moment and that control that you have to incite them against gay people and to be derogatory towards gay people, that's wrong, right?
Mm.
So as let's continue to break down some of the reaction and start to expand this conversation to hip hop and then just to greater Black sexuality in general, right? So we've seen reactions from people like Lil Boosie, we've seen reactions from T.I., right, talking about how if, and we'll get to Lil Nas X later as well, but talking about how if we're making space for people who are homosexual, who are trans, who are a part of the LGBTQI plus community to share their stories and how they feel, then it should be okay for someone like DaBaby as a straight male to say how he feels and to be proud of being straight. I want to shoot that down immediately by saying you can be proud of being straight without being demeaning to gay people, right? Without excluding anybody who might have been sucking dick, right? And if they're male, right? If they're one of the fellas from this experience that you're creating at this show, that's messed up. Because I want to get to a little bit more about what T.I. or a little bit more about the greater hip hop reaction and like why hip hop's having a history of homophobia isn't an excuse for this. But I want to make, what did you have something to add to?
It goes onto that, right? Which now speaks on what circumstances allow for that type of dialogue and that type of language to be accepted within hip hop culture, right? When in fact the whole concept of hip hop culture emerges from an oppressed group of people looking for ways to express themselves to the fullest, right? And so in looking at the things that perpetuate that, one of those things is nonchalantness and silence and the perpetuation of ignorance, right? Like we know from growing up what the treatments of gay people are. We can never understand it, neither can we ever truly empathize to a level that is an accurate reflection of what some of what a gay Black man is going through or a gay man is going through. But we have been present in situations where we have seen how they've been treated, even more transparently, right? If we're using this as a space of openness, I said some things that in the past, very long ago, that I'm completely ashamed of. So much so that I, brought it up to you. We had some friends at the time who weren't even, we had friends at the time who we did not even know had come out of the closet, but were around in that situation. Just out of the fear of what I had said, I still went back to apologize to that person in the case that they heard that and could connect that back into the person that I am now, right?
Yeah, but I think you're doing a fantastic job. I think something else you just illustrated was that none of us are perfect, right? As a part of the Black community, a lot of us grew up with the ingrained notion that homosexuality was wrong. And a lot of that is tethered to Christianity, right? And the church. And so I certainly know that my parents have a very different ideas about homosexuality and everything along the LGBTQ spectrum than I do, right? And some of those views have changed and shifted over time, but a lot of that comes from being raised in church where you're told that was wrong, right? And so we all have things to unlearn, right? We all have things that we're not proud of and we need to make space for that. And what's important is knowing that, being humble enough to say I was wrong. I did or thought or said the wrong thing, wrong not only to me morally as a person, but because of who I might have hurt in that instance, who might have been on the receiving end of that, even if I wasn't aiming it, which you weren't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so from there, I would like to move on to DaBaby's response, where he says, what me and my fans do at the live show, it don't concern you niggas on the internet. What I do at a live show is for the audience at the live show. It will never translate correctly to somebody looking at a little 5-6 second clip, regardless of what you motherfuckers talking about. All the internet done twisted up my motherfucking words. And all my fans at the show, the gay ones and the straight ones, we turn the fuck up. Because even my gay fans don't got fucking AIDS, stupid ass niggas. My gay fans, they take care of themselves. They ain't going for that. They ain't no nasty gay niggas. They ain't no junkies. They got class. Even my gay fans got standards, right? And so that's his
Wow.
response to being called out about his statements on stage. And so again, I'll let you tell us a little bit about what that says to you. It's tough. It's rough.
It's
Nasty.
yeah, man. It's nasty. Like it's another instance of when part of my friends shutting the can actually be of so much value. And I think it's so indicative of just the society that we live in. Like the rush in order to respond, it's so quick. It doesn't even allow our ego to get out of the way before we push into it. And often, what you see when you're speaking from a place of being defensive and speaking from a place of defending ignorance, you very quickly end up in a situation where you are almost encouraging that ignorance, right? And opening up space for it. So in the case of, in this particular instance over here, it's like, listen, if being defensive and rushing quick to comment on things can land people in situations like this. What did you think reading that?
Well, first, reading it just now, I felt that it should have come with the trigger warning, and I apologize for that. Like, I honestly, as I was finishing that, I felt like I should have started this with like, yo, if you are a fan listening to this, like, this is some messed up language. So I apologize for not saying that beforehand. But and I only read it because I think what he says in there has a little bit of something that we can address and just break down really quick. So I'm dismissing the what we and my fans do at the live show. It don't concern you on the internet. If you're looking at a 5-6 second clip, nah, fam. What you said, it ran. I heard enough. I heard enough. There's no way you can spin that. So that's that. So, but the other thing that he says about his gay fans not having AIDS, his gay fans not being nasty, his gay fans having standards, just perpetuates this whole narrative that is, especially the word that even in there, you know what I'm saying? Even my gay fans don't got AIDS. Even my gay fans got standards. It perpetuates the idea that, yeah, there are the majority of gay people are, what did he say? Nasty, that they are junkies, that they got no class, that they don't have standards. And it, again, as you said, reacting quickly from that place of ego doesn't allow you to dismiss these prejudices you have before you readdress the world again. You have an opportunity to be different, to be better, to start some healing. But if you double down on ego, if you double down on me being right, you're gonna find yourself leaning upon faulty logic. And I think that's what happened here. And it's
More times than not.
It's nasty, man. It's nasty.
Yeah. More times than not, responding out of ego in that manner will lead to that, right? There's always the pursuit to always be right, especially in being defensive, is always going to overlook some critical nuances that can open up space for perspective, right? And in this particular case, the perspective would have been to understand why the proximity of HIV and AIDS and gay people not only is incorrect from a statistical point of view, but also wrong from the point of view of its origination, right? It's if you know what I know, being where I'm from, which is one of the highest countries with HIV and AIDS rate, that is not a sexually specific disease. It's not a sexual preference specific disease. That is beyond ignorance from a statistical perspective, right? Now, if we're speaking about what's real and what's not, forget connotations and what we have, the stigmas that we have put against that, right? It is statistically incorrect. The majority of people that have AIDS are straight people. That is from the book. Right. And if we want to get into how that's specific, and if we want to get into how that spread, that's a whole different conversation, because we know that the migration of truckers and people moving in from the city to villages is actually the biggest transmitter of AIDS. Men from the city moving back into their villages and spreading it that way. Now, that is a straight thing. In the same breath, how come we then don't associate drug abuse with straight people?
I think that's a very good question.
If we're labeling things based on if we're labeling diseases and symptoms, which is what we call that, how come we don't label that on straight people? You know what I mean? That's the ignorance.
Well, yeah, it is. It is. It is ignorance. I think the faulty reasoning behind it is that gay people being ostracized from the community are often pushed to the margins, where, much like Black people, Native Americans, the homeless, there is a higher rate of drug abuse and use because you don't have the opportunity, you don't have the same opportunities, and people use that as coping mechanisms. But I think the greater point is that even if that's not true, the whole point is that oppression is what's happening to these people, right? Whether it's drug use, whether it's being disparaged after you paid ticket money to get tickets to go to a show, right? Like, yo, stop abusing people that are different than you, period. And if you're somebody who knows what that feels like, then you should have a special place to be able to extend your empathy, to understand that even if you don't understand somebody's experience, let them rock. Period.
And that's always been the big hypocrisy of how Black men in particular have treated gay Black men or gay people, is that we are faced with our kinfolk who are going through an oppression based on who they are as people, not as a choice, but who they are as people. And they are being there's a prejudice against them because of that, and the inability for us to be able to understand that, especially understanding that Black men are extremely oppressed, and at most times need Black women to pull them out of the oppression that they face. It would only make sense to be able to identify situations where people are feeling the same thing too, being treated unfairly for who they are. And you would hope that there'd be a window there where we can then come in to protect. So in kind of the purpose of this conversation is, and I don't want to use this as a soapbox moment as we're holier than thou, which is why I wanted to lead with an example of saying that I've spewed ignorance before, right? I'm not speaking as a man who is perfect in his in his interactions and everything. No, I've said things that I regret. I have understood why they would be hurtful, and now I'm a active. I try to participate in conversations that can at least show the numbers of people that do not support that type of dialogue, that do not support that type of ideology, that do not support that type of misinformation, and also hold each other accountable. If we can also, one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing, Miles Xavier, is that as Black men, we're scared to look around each other and point other Black men out. And if you don't believe me, go to a barbershop and see what happens then. Gangsters get quiet in barbershops, bro. Gangsters get quiet. Somebody cuts you, most of the time people aren't going to talk. Like, Black men are scared to call each other out. You feel me? And so that's kind of why on my end having this type of convo was so meaningful. And forgive me for choking up and pausing so much, but it's very important for me to be very intentful with the words, man. Words of power.
Don't apologize at all, man. I think a lot of the connections you made there are hugely important. And I just appreciate you bringing the appropriate gravity to this conversation. But we like to have fun on this podcast. So the way I want to wrap this up actually ties into a little bit of what you just said. You know what I'm saying? We have to hold people accountable. Black men are scared to call each other out. There's a little bit of just, as you said, nonchalance, a little bit of silence. That's the bottom line. So if that's the bottom line, right, and that's wrong, what does it mean that in the context of everything we've just talked about, DaBaby started his set or in the middle of his set and brought out Tory Lanez while playing features that he has with Megan Thee Stallion? This same set, same show, Rolling Loud.
It is what it is, dude. It is what it like. Look, corny is corny. There's no money that covers that. And by corny, I just mean there's no need for that. There's no need for that. There's so much space to not take that road, and just corny niggas are corny niggas. Like it is what it is. Guys, a lot of your favorite rappers are corny.
Big facts.
Heads up.
Big facts. Break down a little bit of what the corniness is behind that. And I just wanted to, because after what we just spoke about, to me, I'm not hearing his music the same. But to have this icing on the cake on top of it, like this little game he's playing, whatever, like I'm done listening to DaBaby, right? Like I'm just not, because, and that's not even like I get to a certain point with somebody where I don't respect you, I can't listen to your music, man. I can't put that stuff in my ears and feel the same way. Maybe certain songs, yeah, here and there, we'll see, but I'm not feeling it. So I just wanted to get your perspective on like, yo, give him a little bit of why bringing Tory Lanez out is messed up.
Look, and it could be Miles because like I'm a type of person that avoids drama, right? It could be that. I'm the type of person that if there is space in order for there not to be drama, and if there's space for there for me not to inconvenience anybody with my presence, but then and that's what I mean by the corny elements of it, right? Why bring out it's designed to grab attention is the corniness of it. It's designed to grab attention. It's supposed to be a shock moment. The timing of when it happens, the features that are being used, even the language, like all of that. Like I can see that it is something that is designed to send a message and grab attention. And we always say that fame is the biggest drug, bro.
Yeah. So if anybody who doesn't understand the situation, doesn't know what's going on, Tory Lanez is accused of having shot Megan Thee Stallion in the foot around this time last year, right? He's denied it or has been unable to speak and hasn't been able to give any details of his side of the story. She says he shot her, right? Point blank, and the situation did not warrant it. I hear a lot of people rumblings and saying that perhaps his side of the story is going to shift drastically. Cool. And if it does, cool. We can have a different discussion about Tory Lanez. But with the public knowing what the public now, and someone like DaBaby knowing what the public is privy to, like, bro, that's not a good look. And like you said, it's just an attention grab because you know what people are thinking. You know what I'm saying? And to associate that with Meg, that's messed up. That's messy. That's not how we move. And that's gonna do nothing but what? Hurt this woman? Come on, man. Even if the situation was messed up on both sides, why? Why perpetuate the hurt? Why sink to that level? Why not be above it? You know what I'm saying? You don't need no Tory Lanez at your show. Clearly, you think you're entertaining enough for everybody. And I don't need to get wild talking to DaBaby on my damn podcast. But like, come on, man. As men, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard than that. We have to look at opportunities like that as not opportunities at all and decide, nah, I'm not going to do that. That's my take on it.
This space is great because we get to have conversations like that.